기조 연설을 시작.
Let us start our series of keynote presentations. Thank you for your patience. We are here at the Global HR Forum 2021. We are here to talk about our future. The first keynote presentation will be on what companies are doing to create a sustainable future. What is the role of companies for this sustainable future? I'm sure that many people are looking forward to the first keynote presentation. The first keynote presentation will be presented by Chairman Taewon of the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
안녕하십니까.
Good morning. As have been introduced, I am Taewon of the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry. First of all, congratulations on the hosting of this forum and thank you for this invitation. Every year, the Global Forum discusses the agenda that is essential for humankind. And it is indeed a great pleasure for me to present under the topic of sustainable future and ESG as a keynote presentation. My title today is The Role of Companies for a Sustainable Future. And how do we link the role of companies with sustainable future? I gave this a lot of thought. When we think about sustainable future, there are so many items that we need to deal with on the agenda. We have to deal with poverty, biodiversity, gender equality, production, inequalities, cities, jobs, healthy lives. So there are infinite number of items on the agenda for sustainable futures, and it is impossible for me to deal with all of these challenges in connection with the role of the companies. And so rather than talking about this vast list of items, I would like to concentrate on climate change and to concentrate on reducing greenhouse gases and also achieving carbon neutrality. Let's take a look at the role of companies related to this essential topic. So, the sense of crisis for the climate is not something that I need to review because we are all experiencing this climate crisis. According to the recent IPCC reports, IPCC stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and in 2007, they received the Nobel Peace Prize. And they are a body that brings together governments to discuss climate change. Oceanographers and those who study the economy or the climate, there are about 3,000 such experts that are joining the IPCC. And so the IPCC is an organization that proved scientifically the impact of climate change on our world. Well, I'm sure that you are well aware of this. Throughout the history of the Earth, we have the highest level of CO2 in our atmosphere. And so it is very difficult to prevent the increase of temperature by 1.5 degrees, and the time that it will take to achieve 1.5 degrees has been shortened from 2050 to 2040. If we actually have an increase of 1.5 degrees, then we will be losing a lot of the biological functions of the Earth. For example, methane gas that is locked in the Arctic areas will be released, which will then lead to higher temperatures and creating a vicious cycle of releasing more methane gas, which will then trigger more climate change. That will make the survival of humankind very difficult. And at this moment in time, it is very difficult to predict what will happen when the temperature rises this much. Based on various analytics and forecasts, we are now coming to the conclusion that we must stop this increase in temperature. So I don't think anyone is against carbon neutrality. Everyone is now trying to participate in achieving net zero. However, as to the methodology, there are different choices that people would like to make. Last week, there was the UN Climate Change Conference, UK 2021, so-called COP26 in Glasgow. And we have seen that many countries around the world have passionately discussed climate change. But other than the topic of methane, it's very difficult to reach a satisfactory conclusion because of the differences of opinion. If you actually go to Glasgow, we could see that about 10,000 climate activists have joined around the venue to say that we need to have action and not just promises. And the civic groups have criticized that this is greenwashing on the part of the government. On the fifth day of the summit, we had the Day of the Youth, and 40,000 youth actually came into the streets to announce their statement, to ask for immediate action. Concerning the ultimate goal of reducing carbon emissions, we all agree. But why is there this complicated entanglement of the interests of different stakeholders? If we're not able to untangle this, we cannot take action. The position of different countries are also different. EU is introducing the carbon tax soon, and in 2060 they will be prohibiting the production of internal combustion engine cars. Because of these changes, the carbon credits is actually at $70 per ton compared to the $19 of the past. With the inauguration of the Biden administration, the U.S. has rejoined the Paris Treaty, and they are also working on carbon taxes. So we can see that they are quickly incorporating various climate policies. But in China, India, and the Middle East, as well as other emerging countries, they are heavily reliant on fossil fuels, and therefore they're not picking up the speed of the EU and the US. In Korea, we are heavily reliant on exports, and therefore the pressure to reduce carbon emissions will also be quite immense for our country. In some countries, eco-friendly policies have become a part of their laws, and it is becoming an opportunity for some companies. In other countries, they are actually finding it difficult to set even the goals. And so therefore, if we take a look at this situation from the corporate perspective, we could have a new angle. By 2030, we are going to reduce carbon emissions by 40%. That is the enhanced goal that we have announced at COP26. Many believe that this is a very difficult goal, but a goal that we have no choice but to adapt. But if we take a look at reality, there are many limitations and challenges ahead of us. The reality of our companies is not easy at all. In order to achieve this goal, we will see a spike in electricity prices, and that will also lead to the increase in production cost. And so it will be a large burden that the companies will have to shoulder in terms of prices. And companies are not sure if they can reflect these increase in prices for the consumers. So concerning reducing carbon emissions, it's very difficult to take that first step forward, especially for industries that are carbon intensive, such as steel and cement. They will now have to review the fundamentals of the business model that they have had for the last few decades. And the overall supply chain will be shaken because of these fundamental changes. In order to become low carbon companies, we will need to introduce innovative new technologies. And in order for this to work, we will need time and investments. And we do not have the institutional backing to support this for the companies. So in a nutshell, it is very difficult to achieve. And because it is difficult to achieve, can we delay this or can we avoid this? That is what some companies are thinking. If we give up on this process because it is difficult and allow the climate change to go on as it is, what will happen? Well, I mentioned that it's difficult to predict, but there are predictions that are being made by various organizations around the world. And if we look at some of the scenarios, you can see that this is a very conservative scenario. According to Nikkei Asian Review, in the next 10 years, there will be a loss of $17 trillion by 2030. $17 trillion in the Korean currency will be an enormous astronomical figure. The World Bank has mentioned that by 2050, if things remain as it is, the volume of the scale of losses will be $158 trillion. In the UK, they have analyzed that if things remain as it is, 40% of our GDP around the world will disappear by 2100. And so the economic impact of climate change will continue to increase exponentially. And so our future generations will have to live with these results. In other words, we will not be able to achieve a sustainable society. Without a sustainable society, will we be able to have sustainable companies? And so, we cannot delay or ignore the carbon issue. From my perspective, I believe that net zero is a must. It's not a matter of choice. And so we need to take a look at this from the perspective of finding opportunities in this transformation. We see that many companies are utilizing this situation as new opportunities. As you're well aware, Tesla has been able to change the history of industrial combustion engines, which have lasted for 130 years. And Tesla has grown into a company with a higher market capital compared to all of the IC vehicle producers combined together. Of course, Tesla did not achieve the market capital with just EVs alone, but EVs have become the initiative for Tesla. Many Korean companies are investing in battery technologies, and we have become leading battery companies with outstanding technologies. Hyundai Motors have mentioned that they will stop selling their IC engine cars by 2030, and we see that many companies have joined Hyundai to create the Hydrogen Business Summit. So you can see that not from a government perspective, but private companies are coming together to contribute to the government goal of net zero. If we are able to utilize this opportunity, then we will be able to achieve our never achieved goal of becoming an energy independent country. We have gone through oil shocks, and whenever the oil prices and energy prices went up and down, it did have a huge impact on our economy. We always dream of becoming energy independent, but thus far, we had no means to achieve this goal. But I believe that climate change may give us this opportunity to achieve this dream of becoming an energy independent nation. Companies have always found answers to change the world in times of crises. And I believe that this time around is no exception. Satisfying the needs of the society is what companies should do, and this is also the same for carbon neutrality. Individual companies and industries are at different situations, and some companies are not prepared to usher in the era of net zero, especially for SMEs and energy-intensive countries. They are being threatened, and their survival is being threatened. In this situation, introducing carbon taxes that will unilaterally demand carbon emission reduction for all companies, then it will be very difficult for most companies to respond. And so carbon tax itself is not the best solution to achieve net zero. We need to give this another thought. And the companies, along with the society and the government, should review this issue. So we have a set goal of reducing carbon emissions. That is a goal that we have together. But as to the methodology, we need to give this more thought. And I would like to present one new idea related to this. In order to have a change that has an impact on the society, we need to be able to think about the situation of the company. We should not use net zero as a penalty for the companies, but rather use incentives. Penalties could be for perhaps carbon taxes or carbon pricing. That means that companies that are not able to reduce a certain amount of carbon emissions will be penalized with taxes. But if we use that system, companies will not reduce the carbon emissions under the level that is mandated. Because if we reduce it further, then there will be additional cost. And so if we have that negative system, then companies will only try to meet the standards. And so even companies that can further reduce carbon emissions will not have an incentive to reduce carbon emissions even further. And so I think we can go in the opposite direction. We need to incentivize technologies and action. And if they can receive credit for their reduction, then that would be a more efficient, productive way. For example, we could have carbon credits, and after a long time, we could receive cash credits. Of course, you could talk about whether this is fair, whether we have the resources for this. But I think we are in a situation that is too urgent to deal with these extra issues. Of course, we have to deal with these issues, but we can think of various ways of providing credit. We can utilize cryptocurrency, for example. Cryptocurrency can be given as credits. Cryptocurrency means that it will not have an immediate burden on the real economy. We're talking about 2030 or 2040. And at that point in time, we could possibly cash in this cryptocurrency. The reason why I make this suggestion is not because we are not able to accurately assess who has reduced how much by using which technology. And so it's very difficult to incentivize this. But if we are able to utilize cryptocurrency based on blockchains, then I believe that by 2030, all things will be measurable, and by that time, we will be able to assess the contribution of different companies in terms of carbon reduction. And so therefore, by then, we will be able to incentivize the contribution made by different stakeholders. And if we take a look at the profit side, startups or venture companies, they are coming up with green technologies and innovative ideas to reduce carbon emissions, but it's very difficult for them to receive investments because these business models or technologies cannot be cashed in immediately. But when these technologies are absolutely needed in 2030 or 2040, then investors may want to invest now for the future, because that is where the profits will be in the future. And that investments could be made with cryptocurrency. That will mean that a market is created, and I believe that we can open a brand new market around the environment. We need to foster eco-friendly companies equipped with green technologies. And if we grow this pie, then we will be able to efficiently reduce carbon emissions on the part of the companies, and the government can also have a less of a burden in encouraging the companies to reduce carbon emissions. People will talk about where will the money come from, but there are tax credits that are being talked about and carbon tax. So in the future, if carbon taxes are in place and there are companies that do not abide by the standards, then that resource could be utilized. I don't think that this system would be applied to any single country, but we need to think about whether we can use this system at COP26 or the future Conference of Parties or through the UN. Then maybe our goals will be closer to our reach. We have to take a look at the flexibility of our institutions and policies. I gave you one example of an innovative method, but with higher flexibility, I think we will take a step closer to our ambitious goals of 2050. So thus far, I have discussed my thoughts on carbon neutrality from a corporate perspective. The requirement of the companies from the society is not limited to climate change and carbon emissions alone. Up until now, all companies have focused on profit making, and we do not have a lot of experience in working with social challenges. But as I mentioned before, if the overall system makes sure that these goals become internal, then it will be easier to achieve. ESG, carbon, all of these goals are external goals. It's great to do this, but it will not impact our stock prices, for example. And so one of the ways to solve social challenges through corporations is to make sure that these issues are internalized into the corporations themselves. This has to be incentivized. And when that happens, then companies, I believe, are the most efficient organizations to find creative solutions. And so, if we take a look at the role of the companies in finding solutions for social challenges, we need to make sure that social challenges are internalized into the companies to contribute to society. If we continue to ask companies to become good companies, that will not be enough in encouraging companies to contribute to finding solutions for social challenges. The speed of change in our society is faster than the speed of creating solutions for the challenges that arise. And that is why more and more challenges are driving us into a corner. And it will be very difficult to live in this world full of challenges. And in order to have a sustainable company, we need to have a sustainable society. And therefore, creating a sustainable society is the role of the companies. So let me now conclude. Companies have utilized various tools to find solutions for the pain points of our customers and our potential customers. We are very good at that. And so let me emphasize again, we have to take a look at why this issue is our potential customer, and we have to take a look at the pain point of this new customer and internalize social challenges in order for more companies to participate in finding solutions for these social challenges to create a sustainable society together. As a member of the private sector, I will also lead the way to do our part. And this brings me to the end of my keynote presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
네, 여러분 최태원 회장님께
Thank you very much, Chairman Choi. Another big round of applause, please. We have just heard the first keynote speech. We all know that this is the way forward, but this road is very difficult. Well, from the corporate perspective, thank you very much for this frank dialogue. In order to change the difficulties into opportunities, we need to change our mindset. As we hear the presentation, we are able to take a new look into the role of companies for a sustainable society. I think we should all take a look at this issue together. Thank you very much for this presentation. That brings us to the end of the first keynote speech.